Welcome, everyone, to the captive audience. It is the 11th of March in the year 2025. And I don't know how much time that is in Doge years, but it feels like a lot of years. And we are very pleased to have with us tonight former state representative and leader of the Oregon Citizens Lobby, among many other attributes, Jeff Krupp. Jeff, thanks for being here with us tonight.
Kevin, it's always good to be with you. It's been a while.
It has. You know, we were showing the last one that you and I did. We were showing that as an encore episode just to see if we couldn't, give people some clues as to how they might assist in the process of pushing back on bad legislation, of which there's almost an infinite amount in Salem, isn't there?
Well, the legislature's in session now, and yeah, there is. I mean, it's all kinds of crazy ideas like a statewide property tax.
Yeah.
That they want to put out there. Other ideas like a 4% tire tax that, for new tires and recap tires, but the money doesn't go to the roads. It goes for wildlife overpasses and fancy artwork and environmental groups.
What's amazing is they invented a term called tire pollution, but they don't exactly say what that is or what this has to do with doing anything about that. Because I would think that getting new tires would be better for whatever they might consider to be tire pollution.
Well, it is. And, the thing about tires is they're mostly recycled these days anyway.
Yep.
And so what this is just another scam by the big government Marxists that run the legislature. And this is just to extract more money from us, we the people, to help them fund their out of control spending and their utopian plans of what Oregon can be like if it was just a little more socialist, a little more. I mean, who knows what actually comes out of this thing? I do know that the governor's getting a little worried about this diesel truck ban.
Yeah.
That is done by bureaucrats, not by the legislature. So it's really not lawful.
Right.
But they've tried to make it like it was lawful. So she's getting a little nervous. She's asking them, well, the Department of Environmental Quality, can you lighten up on the rules a little bit? Because really what they want us to do ultimately, Kevin, and you know this, is they want to ram their radical leftist environmental crazy agenda down our throats. And this, in fact, is why I'm sitting in my vehicle here in the great little town of Harrisburg, because tonight there's a meeting that is just starting that is pushing back on taking 1,500 acres of prime farmland outside of Harrisburg and putting solar panels on it. And the whole reason they're doing that, Kevin, is because they need replacement power, because they plan to shut off the electrical generation from our dams.
Yeah, the hydroelectric. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. The cheapest electricity you can find anywhere, they want to shut down the dams, breach the dam. Here's the problem. What are you going to do about flooding? If you breach the dams, because the federal judge might order it someday.
Yeah.
Because, salmon are more important than fish, or people. Fish are more important than people. When a federal judge finally orders that someday, then who's going to control the flooding? Who's going to control the damage that's done to farmland and to crops that get flooded after a major rainstorm? Because there's no dams there. And then talk about the incredible increase in cost of living. Can you imagine having to pay much higher rates? I mean, just look at what Portland General Electric has done in the last 3 years. They're up 43% and going higher.
Yeah.
That's partially because of all the green energy projects they've had to invest in. And Cascade Policy Institute has a great research paper on what it has cost us to shut down the Boardman coal-fired electrical generating plant. So you
Oh
add all this
yeah.
stuff up, and it begins to make it not at all friendly to live in Oregon. If you're a working man like me, I'm a farmer. I mean, my rates for generate or for using electricity to irrigate have gone through the roof, and it'll only get worse. So just this is the kind of stuff, and a whole lot of other things, including the Democrats have reintroduced their bill that makes it a crime to remove pornography from our schools. I call it the Dems porn forever in our schools bill.
Yeah, that's right.
They've reintroduced this thing.
Porn for preschoolers.
Yes, porn for, and frankly, it's there, sadly. So, I mean, just stuff like that. And this is why, we at the Oregon Citizens Lobby are really trying to train just the average person how you can be more effective at standing up for what you believe. And if you don't believe that, the green scam is the right way to go, if you don't believe that, grade schoolers should be subject to absolute pornography in their libraries, if you don't believe your taxes just need to go higher and higher and higher and government needs to get bigger, if you don't believe in any of that stuff, we train people how to fight that in a nice way, but how to go to the legislature, how to talk to a legislator, even when they're not at the legislature, maybe they're home for a town hall. How do you call, how you leave a message, how you write really effective testimony, how you talk to a legislator who doesn't want to talk to you. And we teach those techniques to average people. And we do that every Thursday across the street from the Capitol building in the Ike Box Coffee House upstairs. And we're there from 8:30 in the morning. We've got coffee. Some people usually bring in some cookies and homemade desserts and that kind of stuff. We're there from 8:30 till 3. We usually have a legislator that comes by. And this Thursday, we have Dr. Douglas Frank, who's joining us, who's actually in Salem tonight. He's come from Ohio to, again, talk about election integrity issues. And there will be bills in this legislature that will deal with election integrity that won't be good for those of us who believe in transparency. So we talk about all of this. We train just the average person that just comes and spends a few hours with us, how you find a bill on the state's website, how you go to that bill and you make a comment, okay, how you submit comments. You can do it 48 hours after a hearing on a particular bill, and you can do it 24 hours before. We just teach people that because most folks are just busy living their lives, Kevin.
Yeah.
And, they don't eat and breathe politics the way you and I do. And so when they hear about something like keeping pornography in schools forever, they get upset and they want to do something about it, but they don't know how. And that's what we try to teach them at the Oregon Citizens Lobby. Again, it's called the War Room. It's upstairs at the Ike Box Coffee House, which is right next to the YMCA at the end of the Capitol Mall where the state capitol is. We used to hold that meeting in the Capitol, but they're about they're spending well over $600 million to rebuild the Capitol building to make it earthquake proof when they could have torn it down and rebuilt it for half, literally for half.
It's just amazing, isn't it?
They're a year behind, and they're at least $150 million over budget. It's the most incredible thing.
It's a classic example of what they're doing wrong. And by the way, I've joined you a few times in the past at the War Room, and I posted the homepage of the Oregon Citizens Lobby, OregonCitizensLobby.org, and it lists right at the top War Room every Thursday through session and the information about the Ike Box and how you can also kind of get on the public group discussions and stuff so that you can stay on top of what is happening. When you mentioned about election bills, I imagine these are going to come up when Dr. Frank is there talking with you guys on Thursday. There's House Bill 3470 requires verification of citizenship to register to vote. What do you know?
It's a good bill.
No problem.
The only problem is It's not going anywhere. The Democrats are not going to let anything like that pass.
Yeah.
Now there are a couple of bills that I think Democrats are willing to entertain because they have constituents that will be helped by it. But and one of them would be raising the death tax limit in Oregon, the estate tax, from $1 million to $7 million.
Yep.
They probably won't go that high. But even if they doubled it, to 2 or 3 million, that's some progress. But here's what they'll do, Kevin. Any of these bills that they normally wouldn't pass, but they throw a bone to the Republicans, what they'll do is they'll use it as trade bait. They'll use it as trade bait for something like the Green New Scam bills, or maybe even the 4% tire tax.
They might gut and stuff it too, right?
That's right. That's why we don't teach this so much, but it's so important to have the right relating to clause on a piece of legislation. I learned that the hard way in my first session in 1999. I wanted to cut taxes, so I introduced a tax cut bill, and it said relating to taxes. Well, guess what? My own party took that bill and gut and stuffed it. They gutted everything out of it that I wanted and stuffed in some other tax thing. It wasn't a tax increase, but it was. I learned that lesson the hard way. But you're right. If it's got the right relating to clause, they can stuff anything to it, and they can do it at the last minute. They can give you a 1 hour notice that a hearing is going to, or a work session where you can't say anything.
Yeah.
They'll give you a 1 hour notice. And those are time honored tactics. They do at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, the last day of the session, when they keep you up all night, Kevin, on purpose. So your resistance to voting no is less, right?
Yep. Yeah. And now they have that hard and fast sine die, which puts a little pressure on them. But since walking out isn't exactly the option it once was in the same way, it still exists. But as we saw, it can just produce an exodus of legislators. And we lost a couple of seats in the last legislative session. So in a way, they may not even care. I know that there's going to be a moment where they go too far, and there will still be possibly some walking out, right? But they got a lot of stuff on their list of terrible things they want to do. And we got this gas tax thing that they want to do, where they get around directly raising the state gas tax. So they want to empower cities and counties to raise the gas tax. And you mentioned the statewide property tax, which is just galling, and it's insane. And then some of these other legal changes, they want to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in school board elections. That one, I'm sure, is and I'll bet that these are kids that are sitting in a classroom where the person teaching them wants them to vote a certain way.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so, and you and I aren't going to be able to be allowed in there with the same stature as the teacher and give the opposing point of view. Plus, they're students. They're living in socialism, basically. They don't have to pay for anything. Everything sounds like it's free. They've been told that for years. And so they want these guys to flood the election rolls and then turn them out in school board elections. And it's insidious. And then, of course, there are 2 bills, which I'm confused about, maybe you've heard about them, that are meant to restrict citizens from using the petition process. They want to raise the threshold for getting a citizen petition referred, which, I don't know if there's anybody's explained the wisdom of this to you. I haven't had it explained, but I do know that sometimes that's the last resort, although it's been dramatically damaged already by the things the Democrats have done. They have ballot titles that are lies, like Measure 110. Right. They have They've made it very, very rigid as to how you can gather signatures, how make it easy to disqualify, very difficult to pay people to gather signatures. And then um, I know that the initiative petition process uh, at this point has been used by the other side quite effectively on some bills, but they've invoked an emergency clause on every single bill that they want to pass because everything's an emergency now.
Yeah, so it's fascinating that you bring up the emergency clause because that was an initiative petition that I was involved with a few years ago, and we only missed it by about 2,000 signatures. And we took them to court because they disqualified signatures of people who were registered to vote but were classified as inactive voters. But yet those same inactive voters can still get a ballot and go vote.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't count their signature in an initiative petition to fix some things. So, you know, we basically what they're trying to do is make it harder for the citizens to put forward an initiative and get it out there and let people vote on it. That's what they're trying to do here. That's the bottom line. So the way I characterize it and the way that I think people should talk about it is to simply say the Democrats want to take away your right to vote.
Yeah.
That's all you have to say, because that's what it is. Because they're raising the bar so high that virtually nobody can meet the signature requirement, the numbers of signatures you have to get, unless you spend millions of dollars. And guess who spends millions of dollars in politics in Oregon?
Yeah, George Soros, the teachers unions, the AFL, CIO, SEIU. Yep.
They all do. That's right. Now, the other one says that you have to gather X amount of signatures from each of Oregon's 36 counties. And that's
like
going to make it really hard to do.
Yeah.
And that's got some Republican co-sponsors on it. And that's been tried before, and we've been able to knock that back previous times. And I hope it doesn't pass.
Well, and this is why the Oregon Citizens Lobby, you obviously are probably dealing with a lot of Republicans that are involved with it,
right?
To lobby the legislators as citizens, but we're not just speaking to Democrats, we're speaking to everybody. So sometimes Republicans also need to hear from real people. And as you said, these hearings, they like to call them on relatively short notice. People have to drive, you know, that might be dramatically impacted by one of these bills. They might have to drive 6-8 hours to get there. You can't even do it in time.
No, you can't. Now that only happens at the very end of the legislative session, because now I think we have a week's notice. They publish what the bills are going to be heard next week. But as the legislature goes on, that timeline gets shorter and shorter. And this is actually one of the few good things that came out of COVID was us being anywhere across the state, being able to testify on the internet on camera. So, I mean, it's not the same, as you know, Kevin, because you've been in and around the legislature a long time. It's not the same, but it still is an opportunity, especially if you have something that's really profound to share, that who knows, with one or two legislators may make the difference on a bill that could kind of go either way. Like this wildfire risk map, you know, that is so bad. You know, there's been a lawsuit filed against it now, because what it creates is people losing their insurance, homeowners insurance, because this risk map now, which was generated by computer AI, basically. Okay.
Yeah.
What this thing doesn't take into account that you may have cleared, you know, property around you, so that you have a fire break. You know, it doesn't take any of that stuff into account. So what's happening is is that people are already being noted. Now, this map hasn't even been adopted, and they're already being notified by some insurance companies that they're going to cancel their insurance.
Yeah.
And so there's a lawsuit about that now. Well, that's so radioactive to some of these Democrats who actually represent rural
areas,
urban interface areas like that, that the Democrats are now starting to say, we got to stop this. We got to fix this. Okay. And that's a good thing. And it go back to the point of the Oregon Citizen Lobby, because a lot of people let their voices be heard about that issue. The Democrats are backing off. And that's what we try to teach people again in the war room, is how to maximize your time if you are testifying, whether it's in person or if you're on video or you're writing testimony, how to do it so it's really, really impactful. So we're there every Thursday. Come and join us. Bring your laptop, bring your iPad, because we literally ask people to get on the internet, because there's Wi-Fi there in the building, and look at legislation, and then we'll talk about it. We'll talk about a particular bill, maybe an amendment to a bill as we get later in the session, why it's good or why it's bad, why you should support this, what are the talking points. And then literally we'll ask people to write up comments about it. And then if they want to go across the street and there's a hearing that's happening, that if they want to go across the street, how to go across the street and sign up and testify, so that you literally can grow in that experience. And then the next time that you're either in town or you make it a point to come to Salem, to the legislature for a particular hearing, you feel a lot more confident. Yeah. Especially if you've commented on several pieces of legislation online, or if you've actually testified. You won't do like I did. The first time I ever did it was many, many years ago, long before I was in the legislature. And I sat in the back of the room, and I didn't know how you address the chair and
right.
You know, members of the committee. My name is blah, 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 blah. And I could have been, I mean, I stumbled through it. I was okay. But the reality is, if you practice it a little bit, and again, this is what we teach you to do in the war room, it's Oregon Citizens Lobby, a little bit of practice goes a long way in your opportunity, when your opportunity comes, to make an impact. So we teach you how to do that, and then we want you to go into action. We actually also watch hearings and floor sessions in real time, and I'll talk about them. You know, what's going on here? Why does this person say that? Why did they just recess? You know, and those kinds of things, so that if people understand, again, the average citizen who's never been around this stuff can come to the war room, and after a day leave there, you know, realizing that it's not complicated, but you just need to do a few things well, and you can make a difference.
Yeah. And I think the people who want to pass some of this stuff and really don't want to hear from the citizens, they want you to kind of be a little afraid. And this really takes you over that threshold. You start to go, oh, wait a second. Actually, we're just asserting the fact that we're the citizens and we really ultimately are in charge still. But only if we use our voices.
Right.
And this is kind of an extension of the First Amendment. It's a special case. And I remember years ago, I think it was Lane Shetterly. Remember, I was reminiscing with some folks about Measure 30. I think the first time I met you, I walked into a room, and you were in there, and Jason Williams and a host of others, and we talked about how we were going to get signatures to get that tax increase referred.
Right.
And Lane Shetterly, one of the signing locations that we set up for the petition, we did a live radio broadcast. A guy named Victor Bach, you might remember him from
I remember Victor. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
He came out and he was interviewing me. He'd interview people driving by. And then he also had a remote interview with Lane Shetterly. And Lane said, well, see, what the people out there don't understand is they don't understand what happens in the building. They're outside the building, and they don't understand what what this means in the building. And I was just like, that just helped us get a whole bunch of signatures, by the way. But this is the attitude, and that's our building. That's not his building, you know?
Right. But the problem is people let the power go to their head, and I'm talking legislators. Okay.
Yeah.
And it just happens by kind of naturally and by osmosis. It's not a good thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Because here you are, you have to operate by certain rules, and there's a certain process, right? And a protocol. And all of a sudden you get to thinking subconsciously without even realizing it, Kevin. You start thinking that, yeah, this is a complicated process. These are complicated issues. And yeah, the average person, unless they're in here all the time, listening and participating, just doesn't get it, what we do. And you become arrogant and you become out of touch. This, and your response to what Lane was saying was so perfect. Because, yeah, they are complicated things. But our job should be, as legislators or people that are trying to disseminate information about bills and legislation, to boil it down to the most simplistic principle you can. So and I want to use the example of Democrats wanting to pass Senate Bill 1098, which is this Senate bill that makes it illegal for a school board to remove pornography from schools. Okay.
I can't even believe that's a real thing that they're trying to pass.
So what I like to say is I like to boil it down to, this is the Dems' porn forever in schools bill.
Yes.
And when you say it like that, people go, what are you talking about? Or it was like House Bill 2002, I think it was, that gave 10-year-olds the right to have an abortion and their parents not find out about it or know anything about it.
Yep.
When you say that, people are astonished. You got to be kidding. The example you gave about raising the signature thresholds to make it harder to qualify for we citizens to put a statewide ballot measure out there, you boil that down to the most basic and say, they're just trying to take away your right to vote. And once you get people's attention, because you have to cut through the noise, Kevin.
You do. It's a communications task.
Yes.
And that's, of course, what I spent all my time on is communications. And it's much harder to come up with something short that falls within people's attention span, that conveys the most important idea and motivates them to action, than it is to just generate a tome that no one will ever read, and then the other side wins because no one does anything about it. So you're right. This is the name of the game. By the way, there was a question from Lori here. There is no fee for the training that the Oregon Citizens Lobby does. It's just come to the Ike box.
Yep.
And people who have done it are going to show you how to do it. That's what they're going to do.
And that's, we have returning people, people who live in the area. We have people who drive from Washington County down to every war room. We have people who come up from Eugene from every war room because they're activists. They believe in the power of the citizens to be able to go across the street in the building and make a difference for their principles and their values. Some people only ever make it to one war room in an entire legislative session, Kevin, and that's fine. Because what we want them to do then is take what they've learned and go home and put it to use by watching legislation, by kind of helping us analyze legislation and bills. We need a lot of help doing that. I mean, they've introduced well over 3,000 bills. Probably close to 1,000 will actually make it through the legislative session, through the process. But we need people who believe in our free market principles, believe in the principles of liberty and individual responsibility and limited and small government. We need those people to come and be a part of the effort, even if you only ever do it from your home. And by the way, on the OregonCitizensLobby.org website, there's a training tab. You have to go to About and to find it. But we have a lot of great training videos
You do.
about how you can testify. We also link to the state's video, or not their videos, but their actual protocol about how a bill becomes law. Because most people have no clue, because maybe they learned it in high school at a government class, Kevin.
I learned it in ABC Schoolhouse Rock in the early 1970s.
Okay.
So I can sing it still.
Yeah. Most people, again, are just busy living their lives. And when something gets their attention and they want to get active, that's the value of joining with us and watching the training videos and understanding how the process works. And all of that's there on the Oregon Citizens Lobby. And it's Oregon Citizens, plural.
Yeah.
Oregon Citizens Lobby, all one word, .org.
I've been posting the links. I posted the link to the training videos as well.
Thank you.
Which people can watch and get started. And, as much as I've had some experience testifying, and I've spent time talking to legislators and being in Salem. And of course, we do this show. We talk to legislators quite often as well. But I actually found every single time I've made it down to the Ike box, it's been helpful. And it helped me getting more engaged. And sometimes the information that's written about a bill, like even, there might be a description on Oregon Citizens Lobby of the bill. There's, of course, the information that's on the Oregon Legislature website, OLIS. But then there's like, but what about this? Or who said this? And why is that in the bill? And we go to the Ike box and you get to ask somebody who spent time trying to figure that out, and you get an answer. And you feel like I felt like I would go from here to there, and in terms of knowledge about a bill I cared about. By the way, there's really there's a bill that I just stumbled across. It's a Senate Joint Resolution 7, and it is to get rid of the fake emergencies. It would reduce them. Would require a 2/3 vote to include an emergency clause in a bill. Makes perfect sense. If it's an emergency, you should be able to get 2/3 of the legislature to support the idea that it is. And of course, I think the initiative petition, I don't know if it's the same one you talked about, but I mean, Jason Williams, I remember he was involved with one. It was called No More Fake Emergencies or something like that.
That's the one we barely missed getting on the ballot.
Yeah, I didn't know the barely missed part that you mentioned. Yeah. I didn't know that story, but this is something. And I'm going to post this because this would maintain the fear that if they pass something so egregious, that we might have the opportunity within 90 days after the bill has been passed to gather or signed into law, I think, to gather signatures to refer it to the ballot. And then they just won't do some of the dumb things. It's, as you said, the right of the citizens to have the final say, ultimately, on whether these laws will be imposed on them. And so I recommend everybody take the time to see what's going to happen with this one and do something. Now there is, you have to click through and see if there's a hearing scheduled. And as you've mentioned before, some of these, don't get hearings, but you can provide the contact info for the committee members on Oregon Citizens Lobby, and you can email each one of them and says, give this one a hearing, give it a hearing. Yes. Doesn't this make sense? Tell me it doesn't make sense. Why would you oppose it?
So that's the perfect way to get their attention. Now, usually the legislator doesn't look at the emails. Usually they have staff that does that because there's just way too many emails coming in on bills. But I'll tell you what's important is the bill, it was House Bill 2528. That is Tina Kotek's bill to give the unelected bureaucrats more power, the power to ban cars, diesel trucks, that kind of thing. Okay. But also the power to, again, these are bureaucrats. This is not the legislature. The power to actually tax things.
Yeah.
Okay. It was 9-1 against it in the public comments. 9-1 against. Now, that got a lot of people's attention, like it should have. And that bill's in trouble when you get 9-1 against. If you had 9-1 for, then that tells you that it's pretty popular. And
Yeah.
it's probably something that you're going to do. There's a bill right now that it doesn't allow, boys and girls sports. Okay, in Oregon, right?
Yep, I saw that one. It's actually on the Citizens Lobby website as
Yes.
one of the ones listed under education. So
that's an 80-20 issue. And it is an 80-20 issue because CNN, I don't know if you saw that, released this poll that's 79% agreed that men should not be in women's sports.
79, yeah. They're the people who are fighting to keep men and women's sports can't read polls very well, so we have to help them.
but here's what happens: is the people who run the legislature, the Marxist Democrats, game the system. So like with Senate Bill 1098, the Democrats' Porn Forever in Schools bill. Okay.
Yeah.
That came up for hearing very quickly, and it was 5-1 in favor of that in the online comments that you could read. And that's because we hadn't fired up our base. Yep. They knew it was coming. They fired up their base. So as soon as you could make comment, they got the word out and they got all these comments in there. Now we have to play catch up on our side. And that's why we are trying to, again, develop a greater number of people in their networks. And that's what happens when you come to the War Room in the Oregon Citizens Lobby. You learn those techniques about how to testify, how to spread the word, how to boil it down to something simple that gets people's attention, and then get it out there through your social media and your networks, whether it's on X or Instagram or Facebook or whatever you're using, or if it's just maybe email. Get it out there. Make people aware of it, because I'll guarantee you, Kevin, that most people in Oregon, most parents especially, that care about what their grade schoolers and middle schoolers are reading, probably have no clue that this bill is back.
Yeah, they don't. And the Democrats rely on people basically just not paying attention. That's why we have to do all this work.
Yes.
And it's interesting too. I was trying to find a link to some of these bills that we've been talking about, and there is the statewide property tax. There's the tax. Lori had a question about the tire tax, and I was trying to find a link to that. And the tire tax. She was saying, don't you have to put this to a vote of the people? Well, actually, once they got a supermajority, the Democrats don't have to put it to a vote of the people. That is one of the unfortunate things about the last election, is we lost one seat in each house of the legislature, and that moved us just under the 2/3 threshold of, just under the 1/3 threshold. So now Democrats have 2/3 of the vote, and they can just pass it. But it might be possible to put enough heat on these guys, because they can't afford to lose a single Democrat if they're going to pass it without putting it to a vote of the people. Which means that this pressure could make a difference and make a couple of those people say, I don't know.
Absolutely. About this. Well, so there are Democrats who are up for re-election. All of them are in the House. There are some in the Senate. And there are some bills that are radioactive to them, and they have to be careful about how they vote on them. Boys and girls sports is a great example of that. Okay. In some places, you're not going to get away with that. And so the opportunity, again, for people to make their voice heard is not only profound, but it's necessary. And if people silent, then they'll do whatever they want. Now, one thing, Oregon's Constitution says that any tax increase measure, right, you cannot put an emergency clause on a tax increase measure.
Right. Yes.
So we, the people, on any of these raising taxes bills, will have 90 days, if we want, to file a referendum and go out and gather enough signatures that we can vote on that tax increase. That's the only instance where they can't use the no fake emergencies issue, the emergency clause,
right,
which takes away your right to vote. On tax increases, they can't do that. But believe it or not, they found a way around that too.
Yeah, they eventually get some sort of decision. I don't know if it was legislative council or if it's been tested in the courts, but didn't they say once a tax is in place, they could raise it by a simple majority without asking about it again? Because once it's there, then they just said, well, the legislature can then change the amount of that tax anytime they want.
You can on fees. I don't know if that was litigated.
Might not have been litigated.
I'm trying to remember if that's the case or not. Any new so like this new 4% tire tax, that's new. So we would have the ability to go out and gather signatures,
exactly,
and try to put that to a vote of the people. What happens then is, as soon as we file the paperwork, even though that bill may have been passed and it may have been signed by the governor, it can't go into effect for at least 90 days. Why? Yep. Because we get 90 days under Oregon's Constitution to go out and gather the signatures. Now, it's not that easy. And then they found ways to shorten that time period too. Excuse me. So what the governor can do is right at the end of the session, if they pass a tax increase, the governor can wait to sign that tax increase for up to 30 days. And the problem is the 90-day clock for us to refer it and gather the signatures so we can put it to a vote doesn't begin when the governor signs it. It begins from the end of the legislative session. So they literally can steal 30 days from us, and I've seen them do it, by the way, 30 days from us, and only give us 60 days to go out and gather the signatures.
Yeah.
So those are some of the little games that get played that are really disingenuous, and all of them take power from us, we the people. They work for us. They shouldn't be doing those kinds of things, like trying to take away our vote by making it impossible to put a vote out there that the people want.
Well, and then they've got some insidious stuff that I can't even believe they have the gall to do, because I think once this is exposed to people and explained on any level, they're relying on union power to get this one to happen. But Senate Bill 916, providing jobless benefits to people who go on strike. Last I checked, if you decide that you don't want to work anymore and you just leave a job, or you don't want to work for a while and you're just not going to go into work, then that's on you. And your union might have dues they collected to help sustain that effort, but you don't have a right to unemployment benefits when you willfully leave a job. If you get laid off, then that's a different story. But if you decide to strike, then why are you getting unemployment benefits? And the answer is, well, you're not now, but they want to make it that way. And it would literally be the public, the taxpayers, subsidizing strikes against the services the taxpayers are paying for.
And not only that, this particular bill would pay private striking workers, give them unemployment, but also public workers. So yep. The teachers that go on strike, they could collect unemployment under this bill, even though they're government workers. Anybody who works for AFSCME or SEIU. Oregon would be the first state in the nation to do this for public employees. I think is it 3 or 5 other states have unemployment benefits for striking workers, but none of them for public employees.
Yep.
Oregon would be the first. I wish Oregon were first in other things, but not that.
I wish they weren't last in so many things that truly are a problem. And I got to believe that if somebody's talking to legislators about no more fake emergencies, the 2/3 vote thing, stop the fake emergencies, start doing something about the real ones.
Right.
And because they've created some emergencies that kids are literally, they don't even know how to read and do math, and they're graduating from high school because there's no graduation standard. There isn't any. I think some of the things they're doing do almost constitute an emergency, as bad as it's gotten. Crime in the cities, the fentanyl crisis could easily be described as an emergency at this point, to the extent that we are the worst in the country in this and don't have treatment for it, which we said we were going to have. So how about if they do something about those emergencies?
Well, they should, and sometimes they do. So we had a special session because they had the emergency that they didn't have enough money to pay for the firefighting expenses that had been incurred over the summer, right?
Yeah.
Because Oregon doesn't manage its forests, the federal government doesn't manage its forests, and we burnt nearly 2 million acres of forest land and rangeland. Almost 2 million was the record. Okay.
Yep.
So we incurred more firefighting expenses than ever before. And because some of that's on federal lands, Oregon sometimes has to wait. Oregon goes in and spends the money to fight the fire on federal lands. We get reimbursed, but sometimes it's a year. It's 2 years later. And so in this case, the emergency was, there were local firefighting businesses, local people that had gone out and had expended money and hadn't been paid for months from the state of Oregon. Some of them had to mortgage their homes to pay their employees. That's not right. So that was a real emergency that they held a special session for.
A real emergency. Fixed. Yep.
But so many other things, like you've described, are also real emergencies, like setting children up for failure for the rest of their lives because you won't teach them to a standard that lets them be successful in their lives later on. That ought to be number one. And you don't fix that by throwing money at it. Look at the amount of money we throw at
I got another emergency for you. It's funny you mentioned about federal reimbursements. ODOT has discovered that they don't have $1 billion they thought they did have. Now, I saw that some video in this report of a legislator reacting to this, and it's like, he's kind of incredulous, but at the same time, he's like, well, I don't understand why this has happened. I would treat this as quite the emergency, even a political emergency, because they're going to have to not do a bunch of the projects they thought they were going to do because they have $1 billion less than they thought they were going to have. That should be front and center right now. Like, somebody should be getting to the bottom of this. I think their only solution, unfortunately, is going to be to raise taxes of some kind.
Raise the gas tax, 34 cents a gallon to fill that hole. You know what's sad about that is that nobody's going to get fired over misleading the legislature on that, because the first hearing was, and you saw that in the newspapers, $1.1 billion short because, well, we were counting on getting federal money and it hasn't come in yet. And then the next week, you saw another story that, well, we never really had the money coming anyway.
Yes.
So in essence, what you did was you lied to the legislature. They approved a budget and levels of spending, and you knew you weren't going to get the money. Now, here's the problem. Do you think anybody's gotten fired over that yet?
No one's getting fired. Nope, no one's getting
Right.
fired.
Right.
Apparently, it was the result of some tool that they were
Right.
using to forecast. So it's the tool's fault. And I even
Right.
have not even heard that that tool is getting fired. But uh, what is crazy about this, what's just insane, is that no one is responsible for it. And as you said, they lied to the legislature. And as I understand it, that's not even against the law. Like, there is no statute that says if you tell a bold-faced lie to the legislature, there's no perjury statute. I
No,
remember because way back in 2016, I think it was, or 2015, after they tried some reforms, right? They wanted to have an impeachment clause because
right.
Kitzhaber, and then it turns out, I learned that all these agency heads can get sent in there to say whatever they want to the legislature. They're not sworn in to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. They just, if they lie and then they get the money and nobody does anything about it, success, right?
So when I was a committee chair, and to keep in mind, this was in the late 90s and the 2000s. I served 8 years in the House of Representatives. There actually were at that time, I don't know if they're still on the books, but there are 2 Oregon statutes that say if you're a government, if you work for the state of Oregon, or if you're a lobbyist, your testimony must be truthful, and there's a penalty in the law. Okay. So what I used to do is I would start my meetings and I would remind everybody of those ORSs, those statutes, that your testimony has to be truthful. And, I learned that lesson because the director of the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife lied to our committee about how he was using money from one fund, which you cannot do legally, and spending it somewhere else. He literally lied to us, and said, and ultimately Kitzhaber forced him to resign.
Yeah.
Because
back when that used to happen.
Right, exactly. And so that's why I started putting that statement out there. So in theory, there was, now I don't know if anybody's rescinded it, but in theory, you cannot lie if you are an agency director or like the budget guy who was on the hot seat on the ODOT thing. Your testimony has to be truthful. And if somebody comes forward as a whistleblower and says, no, what he just told you wasn't the truth. And I mean, I actually had that happen to a lobbyist who was working for the state of Oregon, and an official of the state of Oregon. They came in to talk to me about a particular bill, and they left. And then a few minutes later, the state official came back to me and said, hey, can I talk to you for a moment in your office? And he came in and shut the door, and he said, hey, I wanted to come back and tell you that, what you just heard from the lobbyist is not true. And this guy used to be a state cop, and I had the greatest respect for him because of that, because he actually came to me as a state official and said, what you just heard was not the truth.
Yep.
And people need to be called out for that, because it's inexcusable, and you need to be embarrassed for it. You need to be shamed for it.
At a minimum,
you need to be fired. Literally, You need to be fired for it.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people say things that are inaccurate, but that was to the best of their knowledge or ability. But if someone actually knows that this person knew that it was a lie, then it's a real lie. The kind that have consequences for sure.
So let's go back to why ODOT lied to the legislature, because if you read what the auditors wrote, see, it was the auditors who found out that they were $1.1 billion short because they had counted on money coming in from the federal government. The auditor's statement about their accounting practices was, and I'll paraphrase, is they failed to do basic math. Hello, you have bean counters in ODOT, okay? I mean, ODOT's got a big budget. They're a huge agency. You got bean counters, people there that are professionals, and they had to be looking at these numbers and going, hey, this doesn't add up. What are we doing here? I'll guarantee you that went up the chain, that some very good ODOT employees went up the chain with that, saying, hey, this doesn't add up. And somebody at the top said, we're going to do it anyway because it was a political decision.
Yeah. And, this is why we started the show talking about how long it's been in Doge years since the beginning of the Trump presidency, right? And this is why they are literally every day justifying even more, and we know it's wildly popular. It's like in the mid 70s approval rate of what Doge is doing. Why they're justifying why we absolutely need this here. And by the way, those are federal dollars that were enmeshed in this $1 billion thing. I'm just thinking there might even be recourse from the federal level because if the state won't do anything about it, maybe Attorney General Pam Bondi might have something to say about it, and whoever gets appointed as the new U.S. attorney when that happens. Because I think somebody lied, and I think somebody lied to the feds too. Is entirely possible, right?
Well, and that this reaches across both aisles. I mean, you read the stories about the trouble that Greg Smith is in. You know, he basically admitted that, he's had some ethics violations. Well, in talking about federal accountability, the story about the Port of Morrow's finance person signing off on Greg gaming his time cards, if you will, that in and of itself may have put her in violation of federal law. So now you have an accounting person at an agency that denied an $800,000 grant to the Port of Morrow because they were looking, and by the way, these are not Trump's people. These are Biden's people looking at the books of the Port of Morrow and say, this isn't right. What are you guys doing?
When Biden's people are looking at you, it must be bad.
How bad can it be?
It's like with the Val Hoyle thing, when they're actually investigating Val Hoyle's communications with LaMotta. I'm like, what did she have to do to get on the bad side of the Biden administration?
So, I mean, there's a new sheriff in town, and Pam Bondi's part of that sheriff team. And I hope that she lowers the boom all across the country and in Oregon. And if there are federal violations in any of this misspent money, including, we're spending $1 billion every 2 years of our Oregon money to give to illegal aliens.
Oh, yeah. There's a bill right now. They want to extend food stamps to illegal immigrants. And what that'll do is that'll make it so that they'll use federal money probably for, domestic food stamps, but it's all fungible. They're going to take state funds now and put it to that.
That's right. Right. Exactly. And that's a practice that needs to be stopped also. There's also this big, there's a Medicaid loophole for hospitals and providers to use that was around when I was in the legislature, and I left there in 2007. So it's been a while. And and it's a scam is what it is. It's a provider tax. And it just allows providers to get more money from the federal government. You want to look for savings and make the system efficient, which is good for everybody in the long run. Well, you want to lower costs, you got to look at stuff like that. You got to start cutting off the money. And this is why Trump is successful with all these countries that don't want to take these illegal alien criminals back. He just says, okay, how many hundreds of millions of dollars do we give you in subsidies? And every one of them get hundreds of millions of dollars from us. He says, all right, it's all gone. They immediately stop and change their tune.
It literally takes hours for these guys to change their mind after making a chest-thumping statement of bravado, and then before you know it, they're calling and apologizing and doing what he said. Because look, don't screw around with the superpower here, okay? We're done. The kick me sign from the Biden administration's gone off Uncle Sam's back. We're
Oh,
back
that's good.
in business. We are. And by the way, there's another real thing I wanted to mention before we wrap up here. Two things. One is they are back at it trying to see if they can't grease the skids for Measure 114 through the legislature. So that means your Second Amendment rights are, it's the worst law of its type in the country, and it's stuck in the courts, but they're trying to see if they can't get around it. And they really, it's insane. They really want to restrict ammunition sales.
Yes.
Which is crazy because people have to practice to stay good, proficient to defend themselves.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a real one, and that's worth, you got to speak up, because Measure 114 only passed by like 30,000 votes statewide in the state of Oregon. When was that? In 2020? And super close. And I don't think it would actually pass now after the crime wave we've been through.
No,
so I think
testimony. So the bill you're talking about is House Bill 3075. There is a joint House and Senate committee hearing on this bill. It's very anti-gun, this Thursday at 3 p.m. and in the Capitol. Now you can watch it online if you go to the legislature, and it's the House and Senate Judiciary Committees. So look for the Judiciary Committee. Look, and it's a special joint committee that's meeting, and it's invited testimony only.
Yeah,
so the average person isn't going to be able to testify. Right. That's another way they game the system. But you can still testify and write a comment online about House Bill 3075. Okay. And it's this Thursday. We'll just be concluding the war room. Who knows? Maybe we'll stick around a little bit later for the fireworks. We'll probably have some folks go on over there and sit in the hearing room. I guarantee you all the anti-gun people will be there, and they're going to be the ones invited testimony.
Right. They're invited, just not the people. Well, and we have a pretty expansive Second Amendment style provision in our state constitution.
Yes, we do.
So I still think that there's a real chance that it wouldn't pass court muster, but they're going to try anyway. They don't really care. But by the way, I just saw a little news headline that I thought I would mention before we wrap up here. Apparently, the KSLM did the windows get broken out recently?
No, they were shot out.
They were shot out. Oh, okay.
Shot out. So let me tell you, the FBI is involved now.
Yeah.
Friday morning on my radio show on KSLM, I talked about the Alex Jones, ENCORE podcast that I had listened to that was about all the evidence of Western intelligence agencies, CIA, MI6, others, being involved in human trafficking and child sacrifice.
Yeah.
Okay. I talked about that at length. I won't go into it, but I ask people to, if you have a strong stomach, to go to the Alex Jones website and watch the podcast and look at the news reports that they play that are real news reports of these sex trafficking gangs getting arrested across the world. Okay.
Yep.
The next morning at 2 a.m., we have an IT guy in there doing IT work on the computers, and somebody comes by and shoots out the windows. Now, you have to know that we've moved our office. It's in a different place. It's in a small shopping center that you just don't pull up there and shoot. You would have to have walked around the corner and purposefully shot our windows out.
Yep.
So the FBI is involved now. You know, I mean, they just shot out the windows of Tesla, right, in Salem.
Yep.
Okay. And they had firebombed that place. So who knows? Who knows if this is connected to what I talked about Friday morning? Who knows if it's just Antifa being who they are? But I guess it's time to put some bulletproof glass in and put some video cameras up.
Maybe it's time for a really good FBI-led RICO investigation of
Yes.
Antifa that puts them all behind bars, because they are clearly a racketeering
Yes.
organization. They commit crimes, and the
That's right.
people on top claim they have nothing to do with the people doing it on the bottom. But they do. They're actually committing hundreds of crimes by virtue of, and that's exactly what that statute was brought about for, to go after
right.
organized crime in the past, and that's what it is. Because going out and trying to bring down the mob by going and prosecuting every time somebody goes and pistol whips somebody, or gives a guy some cement shoes for a swim, wasn't going to bring down the mob.
Right.
But Antifa, they're out there doing this stuff day in and day out, and I hope that they find out there's a new sheriff in town real soon.
I do too. That RICO statute needs to be used with Act Blue. It needs to be used with Antifa, because I'll guarantee you there's a whole bunch of money coming from that goes to just a few people that's funding an awful lot of this. And that RICO statute needs to be used to prosecute them. And all you got to do is prosecute one or two of them. It'll stop. The money flow will stop, because people do not want to lose their freedom.
Yeah.
And that's what needs to happen. We need to prosecute them, convict them if they're guilty, and then put them in jail.
Yep.
Put it out there. It'll stop.
Make sure everybody knows. That's right.
That's right.
Well, we live in interesting times, Jeff.
Yes, we do.
And you are one of the great warriors fighting the good fight, not only when you were a state legislator, but as a farmer and a citizen, and a leader of the Oregon Citizens Lobby. And I want to thank you for doing that and for being on here tonight.
Sure.
I think we gave folks a lot to think about. We gave them some information on what they can do about it. And now it's just a matter of getting out there and doing the same thing, speaking up, because actually we gave perfectly good examples of what can be done, even with just a small number of people being vocal about what's wrong with a bill.
Very well said. Thanks, Kevin. It's always great to be with you. I look forward to doing it again soon.
And when can people hear you on KSLM? I just want to make sure that they also know when to tune into that.
So KSLM.news, they can listen online to the same show that is broadcast Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. So you go to KSLM.news. That's our website. You can listen to the show online if you can't get our signal. And we also podcast the show. It's under local podcast tab. You scroll down, find Political Coffee, and you can find each day. I put the links up to the stories that I talk about so people can read them themselves, and they can see what it is that I'm seeing, and they can hear, they can download the actual broadcast minus the commercials. So it's Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. It's 12:20 a.m. if you're within, a few miles of Salem, or 104.3 FM. Those are our numbers on the dial, or you can just listen on our app on the phone. You can get it at the App Store, or TuneIn Radio, or any of those great radio apps. Or you can just listen online at your home computer.
Well, I just listed all this here, and so I just posted it for folks so they can go and share it with everyone, and they should listen in. Again, thank you for being the patriot that you are, and keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kevin. Be blessed. Talk to you soon.
Take care, Jeff.